we are going to be speculating on speculative fiction. Today I am joined again by Emma Hardcastle. Today we're going to be talking about Stephen King. Are you familiar with Stephen King?
Yeah, I've read On Writing. I think that actually was the first ever book of his that I picked up because I wasn't a Stephen King fan until about a year ago, maybe. I read On Writing for the purpose of improving my writing and loved it and learned quite a lot about him as well in the process because it's kind of like an autobiography at the same time.
Yeah,
So I
it's a
read that
great
and
book
then
on writing.
it is an amazing book on writing. And then I'm reading The Mist at the moment, and I own Cell. I haven't actually read Cell, but I've seen the new movie that's been out.
Mist to me was a short
And
story. It came from a collection. Is it still, or did he novelize that?
the books, I don't know. I'd say it's a novel, but it is supposed to be like a short story. Maybe it's like a novella length. I don't know what the official word count is actually, but I'm loving it, and I loved the film.
I never
And
saw
I
the
think
film.
now,
Actually, it's a
according to
TV
his
series.
website, there's a TV
Yeah,
series coming out. But the movie was good. I don't think it's
Hollywood
got
loves that guy.
a lot of the
They
people that
love
were
him.
in Walking Dead are actually in the Mist movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a couple of Andrea, the blonde girl, that's in Walking Dead, and Carol. I don't know the real names of these people, but Carol with the short hair,
I'm
she's in
sure
it as
they'll
well.
love you. You're desiccating their careers. You're just a character now.
Well,
You have no real life.
I don't know what their real names are, but as far as the Walking Dead characters go, they're the names of the characters that they played, and they're in the Mist as well. And actually, it's really good. So I'm looking forward to finishing the book to see if it's close to the movie.
Well, did you know that Stephen King has been attributed to the person that killed John Lennon?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Is this some kind of theory, like let's all
Yeah.
point fingers?
They assume there's a conspiracy theory that says he was behind the murder of John Lennon. That
I
he was at one time. Let me just read this because I actually just skimmed it before we started. It
he's a
says that
creepy guy, isn't he, for what he writes? But I don't think that's it's a bit ridiculous.
he was let's see, I'll just read it. The guy who wrote this blog post, let me scroll up here. His name is Alan Pangborn. It's a really neat name. He says this is nuts, and it is nuts to think that Stephen King was behind the murder of John Lennon. I mean, he was already famous in 1981, wasn't he? He already wrote Carrie. He had already written the vampire book that I read. I have read almost every
Salem's Lot.
single.
You see, I didn't like
Salem's
Salem's
Lot.
Lot.
Oh,
That's
you
the
didn't like
one.
it?
No, I didn't really think much happened. It was well written. It was like there was nothing physically wrong with the book. I just didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I were gonna. Like there didn't seem to be very much happening. It was just some creepy guy moves into a house and people suspect he's a vampire, and then like there's something at the end that happens. And I was thinking I've stuck with this book all the way through, expecting something magnificent to happen, and
Back
nothing
when
really happened.
back when you'd walk into a bookstore and you were looking for a book, you'd always find a Stephen King novel. And he was always writing, and that's another conspiracy theory as well, that he has a team of writers pushing books out by
Nah,
Stephen
I don't
King.
believe that for 1 minute. You can tell when you read the books. They've all got that voice to them. He's definitely present when he writes his books. I don't think anybody else does that for him.
There's a when he was writing the Richard Bachman books, he got caught for that exact same reason. Some stockman in a book warehouse caught him because he had a similar voice and
Ah, right. Is
tried to
that how he was found
blackmail
out
him.
then?
Yeah, exactly. Fixing my chair.
He's
Fortunately, I
quite.
lost a wheel.
If you watch interviews with him, he's quite. The way it kind of presents himself is like I don't really care. He's quite. You get. That's kind of what I like about him when you speak to him. It's all bad language and everything. He's just not bothered. He'll go
Yeah.
and do a university talk, and he is who he is, and I really respect him for that. That's why I've kind of got more and more into his work because I liked the idea of Cell. Cell was a book that I kind of thought I really, really wanted to read, and I own it. I just haven't had a chance to read it yet. But I
Publishers
watched
back in the
the.
day, they only wanted him to publish one book a year. It's like, no, dude, you can only do one a year, and he's pounding out like 3 or 4. And he's
Yeah, it's
writing.
writing with other people now as well. That might be why.
What's that?
He's writing with other people. That might be why, including his son. His son's a writer as well.
Yeah, exactly. Have you read his son's work?
No, but I know. Did his son write? Is one of them
Heart in
the
a
author of
Box or something like
Horns?
that?
Something like that. Let's have a look on his. If I have a look on his Amazon, there's loads on there. I'm sure it'll give me a list um of books that he's written with his. Oh, Owen King. He's wrote Sleeping Beauties with Owen King. Because hasn't he got two sons? He's got two sons and a daughter, haven't they? And his
Yes.
daughter's some kind of speaker.
His wife writes too. Tabitha King.
Yeah, yeah, she does. I'm just trying to think of what else. I know that if I just search Owen King, that'll probably be easier. There we go. Right.
I mean,
His
while you're just talking,
newest. Sorry, go
I
on.
don't even know. I'm just trying to read about John Lennon, and I don't even know where this conspiracy comes from. It doesn't really mention it really specifically. Somewhere in the book, a book specifically, says Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon got together with Stephen King and arranged the murder of John Lennon. Just randomly.
It's
There's no reason
creepy
for
though.
it. There's no connection to it. They just got together with Stephen King and said, "Hey, buddy, why don't you write a 24-page leaflet?"
Poor Stephen
Yeah.
King.
Yeah,
He's
we
probably
need a.
thinking, how the hell?
He's the only guy we know that can write. We need a 24-page leaflet. Who do we get? Stephen King. Oh, okay.
The poor guy, I bet he's sat thinking, I know that my writing's a bit creepy and I write some weird stuff, but come on,
He's the only
leave
one
me.
we know. That's the only writer in America, Stephen King. Let's get him to write a leaflet.
His son, his sons are Owen King and Joe King.
Joe King. I know Joe
Joe,
King. I
yeah.
think he wrote Heart in a Box or something like that. And that actually is kind of like Sleeping Beauty or Snow White or something along those lines.
He writes under Joe Hill. He wrote Horns as well, which was a movie with Daniel in that played Harry
Radcliffe.
Potter. That's the
Yeah.
one. Yeah, he was in that. And he wrote Horns as well. So he is quite well known actually. When you go through the Amazon page, there's quite a lot of different books on there.
I mean, obviously, I know who Joe Hill is, but he did at least try to remove himself from his father. It's interesting.
Well, he
Give
did, but
himself a
I
little
think
bit
that's
of a.
probably just to prove that he was capable of doing it on his own and not just famous because his dad were famous, which I can understand really because you'd want to know that your success is your own as well.
Yeah. But everybody knows Joe Hill is, Stephen King's son.
Yeah, well, I guess people now is built that respect up, and people now don't care either way, do they? It'll be the same with Stephen King. He'll have done that so that he can publish more than whatever books a year. And then once people found out that he was the other guy, they're like, well, does it really matter? The books are good. Do we really care whose name it's under?
You know what amazes me the most about Stephen King's efforts is he's writing 1,000-page novels, like multiple 1,000-page novels a year.
Yeah.
That's mind-blowing. And you know what else is mind-blowing is supposedly, according to this website, and what was this guy's name again? Alan Pangborn. Stephen King is including mind control in his novels. He's adding subliminal messages to
Who
his
is this
novel.
guy? What is
His
this
name
website
is
that you're on?
his name is Alan Pangborn, and obviously he knows more about Stephen King than me or you combined.
I think
Okay.
he seems to know more about Stephen King than Stephen King does. Poor Stephen King's going to be sat there thinking, what?
Man, I actually I closed it out. That guy knew way too much, so much that we don't need to look at him anymore. I'm looking for one specific Stephen King theory that he is causing the things that happen in his novels to occur to other Stephen Kings. And by doing so,
Oh, for God's sake, really?
he's protecting his own children and himself by making the things that he writes about happen to himself in other timelines.
You know what? I would be so interested to hear these put to Stephen King himself because he is the kind of guy that would just be like, what the absolute F are you on about? It really would, because if you watch interviews with him, he's so blunt, it's brilliant. Like, he actually says at the beginning of most of his interviews, I am who I am, so you're going to have to bleep me out if you're recording this because I have just got to be who I am and I'm not going to mess about, and that's what I like about him. He's really forward and he's really honest. And I think
Yeah,
that's what I love about him. And his books, I kind of think, reflect his personality in a way.
it's amazing. I mean, he said he wrote, God, let me see if I can find it real quick. He wrote, Yes, this is me not doing research. He wrote one of his novels, the one where the aliens land. He
The
doesn't
one where the
remember writing it.
aliens land.
Yeah, it's one of his earlier works that he did in the 80s. See if I can
Let's have a
find a
look.
list real quick, and that's what I'm actually looking for right now. Here it is.
So Stephen King wrote The Stand after 1975. In 1980, the Kings purchased a second home in Bangor, retaining
Okay, where is it?
their
Where the
summer
hell is this
home.
list?
I'm just
Oh,
trying
that's
to
an
find it.
awards list.
There's Night Riders, Creep Show, which was 82. Maximum Overdrive, which was an adaptation of his short story Trucks in 1985.
The
Um,
Talisman is what I'm talking. No, not the
the
Talisman.
Tali- oh, it doesn't say anything about the
The Tommy
Talisman in here,
Knockers is what I'm
actually.
talking about. He does not remember writing the Tommy Knockers at all. He
Oh well,
says,
he was addicted to drugs at one point, wasn't he?
yeah, that was, he drank cough medicine, he did cocaine, he was smoking weed. Not that
Well, do you
I,
know what? He actually, to some degree, owes his career to his wife as well, because wasn't it Carrie that he wrote and he threw it away? And
yeah,
that was like the novel for him. He said when I was watching the interview with him, he said that when he got the phone call, he remembers sort of thinking, "Oh my God, my wife fished this out. I've got to go and buy something." You know, with all this money that he got from
uh-huh.
his upfront payment. And he said at the time there was nothing open except for like it were like a chemist or something that were open. And he said he just felt like he had to buy her something just to kind of symbolise that it was her that helped him get published. And he said that he ended up buying a hairdryer. And when she got home, he was like, "I give you a hairdryer." And she's like, "Well, that's wonderful and thank you, but we really don't have the money for this expensive hairdryer, so we're going to have to take it back." And he said, "Well, actually, that's not the case anymore. I've just had a phone call from whoever it was." And then that's when they bought their new car and all that kind of thing. So it was actually her, it was actually Tabitha that fished it out of the rubbish bin and said, "No, I think this is good and worth working on." So I suppose we all his fans owe it to her to some
Yeah.
extent, because if not, would he have continued? Would it have gone
What
the way it went?
what's amazing though also is that he stayed with her as well. I mean, he didn't have like, I mean, he's been in Hollywood, he's made TV, he's made movies, he's made millions. He's one of the richest men in America, and he stayed with his wife. It's kind of a romantic story. She made his career and he never, you know, left her.
But they did have some issues, I'm sure, at one point. Was it him or was it somebody else? It might have been another author, but I'm sure at some point there was sort of other women involved. It might not have been Stephen King, but I'm sure I heard something that I don't know. Maybe
I never heard anything.
it might be a different
But then
author
again, I
then.
never really paid attention to it. I always wondered um, how, you know, how you could be so famous. I mean, I always talk to my wife about it. I mean, how could you be so famous? And you know, women are throwing themselves at him. You see 9 figures worth of an income. You're kind of curious whether you can grab hold of some of it. And he
Oh yeah,
maintains that
they
marriage.
did have it. I've just brought something up on the Daily Mail.
The Daily Mail.
The Daily Mail.co.uk. And they did something, and apparently, yeah, they did have some kind of issues. But
What kind of
um,
issues?
let's have a look further down. Let's have a quick read.
I need to buy a whisper quiet keyboard. Doing my podcast, all I hear is click,
Tap
click,
tap
click,
tap
click,
tap
click, click,
tap.
click.
It's the noise of a writer.
Right.
Let's have
And
a
I want to
look.
get a mechanical keyboard too.
Yeah, she kicked him out of the house at one point when they lived in Bangor, Maine, but it doesn't really say much else about that. I thought they had some minor issues, but I don't know. I suppose if they were a drug addict in the house, you would, but is a good role model really for pulling yourself out of stuff like that, because look at who he is now and how far he's come. You know, considering his past and his drug habit and all that kind of thing, and not even realizing that you wrote a book and yet that book's so famous, and then to be where he is today and happy and comfortable and his kids are grown and successful. It's a Despite his past, he is quite a strong role model, because he had his accident as well, didn't he? The
Yeah.
van hit him and he was almost killed, and he didn't think he could ever write again, and yet he pulled himself through that. So as a person, I actually think he's quite a strong personality. He's got quite a lot of influence.
Um, yeah, it's amazing. I typed in Stephen King adultery and nothing popped up.
No,
So, I
maybe
mean,
it's somebody else then that I'm thinking of.
It's amazing. And yeah, you're right about the that was my kids at daycare. Nobody wants us to do this podcast. Maybe there is like a conspiracy theory with Stephen King. He does not want us to talk about him.
Do you know
There's
what?
no
This
multiverse.
podcast is going so bad. It would not surprise me at all.
He poisoned my Taco Bell. He's affected my chair. Like I'm sitting in my chair and all of a sudden there's no wheel underneath it. It's like, what is going on with this chair? I'm like falling asleep.
Well,
We
it's
cannot.
21-minute crap so far. So it's a good job we're not
Your
live.
neighbors like are fighting over a ball.
It was kids that have just kicked a ball and they've kicked it down our drive, and I've had to speak to them before about not kicking balls down our drive, and to just ask if they want to retrieve said ball, and I'll get it for them. But they just seem to want to ignore me. So again, cut all this crap out, Brian. We might as well just. Do you know what? We should just start again. Because we've really right ass of it.
I don't mind, because you know what I've read is that the more human a podcast is, the better off it is, and you learn from stuff like this. Nah, I don't even care. I like it. You learn from stuff like this, and people like it. I would imagine people like it. I don't know what people like.
I don't know what people like either. Obviously not this, but moving swiftly on back to the actual point of the podcast, which is Stephen King.
Tabitha King, the
yes.
woman who stuck by Stephen King and made him famous. I wonder how much she actually has to do with the finished product. I mean, I don't know what Tabitha King actually.
Shall I Google? Shall I have a look on Amazon, see what books Tabitha King? Does she publish under her own name?
Do you know what's happening right now in my backyard?
I can hear. It sounds like somebody's mowing.
Yes.
I really do think we should just start again.
No, we'll be fine. Stephen King, you bastard. Look up.
There is some stuff on there about Tabitha King, but I don't know whether it's her or whether it's somebody else that's publishing under the name Tabitha King. So I don't, because I've never read anything of hers. I've got nothing to really.
Let me ask you: does your partner work with you on your work? Does he read? Does he edit? Does he have a big influence with your authoring?
He's extremely supportive, but no, we don't. He doesn't proofread everything. I'm quite guarded until the end product anyway. And my beta readers are the same beta readers I've had for years, and I tend not to send out ARC copies anymore because I never ever get responses, and people just seem to take the book and run away. So I don't know whether that's what that's telling me, but I tend to be very guarded.
Monty Python just popped in my head. The runaway scene, run away.
So I don't know what that's telling me, but no, I mean it's good for them because they're a family of writers, so they can all swap and change, and they've all got experiences and skills that they can kind of exchange. But no, as far as my household goes, the support, yes, but no, because I'm very guarded and probably wouldn't feel comfortable. I'd feel quite embarrassed. Yeah, I'd let the whole population read the book, but family members, I tend to be a bit cringe when I hand it over to somebody that I know, because I kind of feel that because they know me, they're more likely to judge the quality of work. I don't know.
It's interesting.
Getting inside of the mind of a writer is very strange, but
I let my wife read right away. I get a draft, I edit the living crap out of it, and I hand it to her to do first read, edit, and then I read it again. She does a second read, edit, and I put it out into the world. It's like I am partners with her in terms of producing that first and second draft, and I wonder if he has that same kind of relationship with her, because she's a writer too.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure it's the same for his kids as well.
I wonder, with her. I mean, what has she produced? I remember looking, because Rage was one of his first or second books, right? Rage. You look in the bibliography, he has, that's one of the first books that he wrote. And as like a first or second grader, unfortunately, I found that book in my parents' house, and I read that book. That was one of my first adult reading experiences.
He did actually teach writing though, didn't he, for a while? Wasn't he some kind of professor at a university or a teacher at a university for a while.
If on writing, I don't know if he might have gone into that later on in life, but I think he wrote about his experiences in creative writing workshops, and maybe as a graduate student, he taught literature and writing workshops, but not as a professional writer.
Ah, right. Okay. I actually thought that he taught in a university for a while, but I
Maybe as
can't
a
see
student
anything.
assistant.
I can't see anything here. I am going to just quickly, while we're talking, just have another.
There was I went to the University of South Florida to get my undergrad, and I went into my creative writing workshop. We're going to critique a story or whatever, and the chairs are set up in a circle, and I sat down, and one of my buddies, this guy who ended up dropping out of school and joining the Navy, yes, thank you, mow the lawn. He ended up going in the Navy, and he sat down all excited. He was like manic. He was like, "Oh, Stephen King is in the building." And I was like, "No way." Got up and he's like, "He's on the 6th floor." And I ran up to the 6th floor, and we were both looking around for him, and it like dawned on
He
me. I
did.
was like, why
He
would
did teach
Stephen
creative writing. It says here after living in Maine for one summer, the Kings moved to North Oregon near Bangor, so that Stephen could teach creative writing at the University of Maine. So
Oh,
he did.
really?
He
Oh,
did teach at
interesting.
university for a
Only
while.
one
Sure.
semester?
Yeah.
How old was he? What year was it?
He taught in the spring of 1979. Then it says in 1980 they purchased a second home, using it as a summer home. So I don't know whether that means that he quit teaching, but I can imagine he was doing it for a while.
It's very interesting. That's after he published too. I think
Yeah, it is.
77, 78, 79, he was already starting to get into his publishing career.
Yeah, he actually stayed in England a while as well, according to this. In 1977, the king spent 3 months of a projected year-long stay in England,
Do it.
cutting it short and returning home mid-December to purchase their home. So he obviously came to
Totally.
England for a while.
I would totally rent an RV, shove my entire family into it with my little computer, and just write on the road in Europe if I ever
And is your
publish.
wife aware of this plan that you
Yeah, she'd
plan
have.
to steal everybody away?
Yeah, she has. She would love to do it. I mean, if we had enough money coming in off my career, she would totally quit her job. That'd be
Well, I
totally
think that's
cool.
the dream for everybody, isn't it? But let's see what else it says. It even actually physically describes him in this on his own website. Stephen is of the Scots Irish ancestry. Stands 6'4" and weighs about 200 pounds, with blue eyes, fair
He's tall.
skin,
Most
and
of the
thick
people in this
black
country
hair.
are Scots Irish. That's like pretty much the majority of us,
It
except for
also says
me.
that he has a frost of white, mostly noticeable in his beard, and he has thick black hair. So I kind of think this is older, because if you look at a picture of him now, he's very grey, bless him.
Oh, really? He's
Yeah, so
pushing
this must be an
70.
old description.
He's
I
pushing
know,
70.
yeah. Yeah, still extremely talented considering how well he's been going a long time, and he's had so much experience at writing. I'm pretty sure no matter what he produced now, it'd
That's
be
crazy. I mean, the
successful.
guy is worth $400 million, and he wakes up every single morning and he sits at his computer or whatever his situation is, and he writes his stories every single morning.
He
And you
won
have to,
quite a lot of he's won quite a lot of awards as well. Looking at this, he's won in 2009. He won Fiction Award for Just After Sunset. He won something in 2004 and 2013 for the National Magazine Award. One for Rest Stop, the other one for something to do with Batman and Robin, a magazine thing that he won.
he's a big
Yeah.
Lovecraft fan too. He loves
Oh, is
that
it?
stuff. Yeah, and when he was a kid, he was a big fanboy. He loved that stuff, according to On Writing. He used to go to the movies all the time. And you know what just dawned on me? I mean, in terms of like what he spends his day on, I bet he doesn't know shit about his business. I bet he doesn't run his Twitter. I bet he doesn't even know what Facebook is.
I think he
I bet,
actually does his own Facebook, because I follow him on Facebook and his tweets are extremely Stephen King
really?
personality. Yeah, I actually think that he does run his. I don't know about Twitter, because I don't even know if I follow him on Twitter. I don't really check that often.
I do. He
But
doesn't tweet
Facebook
he doesn't
wise,
tweet enough to where it's actually, it doesn't pop up in my feed enough.
let's have a look. It's one of those verified accounts with the blue tick, and yeah,
Do
some
you
of
have
the
a,
stuff
do you have a
on.
blue tick?
No.
No, I
Although
don't
I
either.
feel I deserve a blue tick. I don't know what it means, but I feel I want one.
I tried to
Everybody else
get
seems to
one.
have one.
they responded back to me and said, "We do not verify accounts like yours." I was like, "What the hell does that mean?" Like
Shall I
mine,
try and see what happens?
like I'm subhuman or something.
He posts a lot of pictures
Your
about his
account.
dog, you know, Molly. He calls this dog Molly the Thing of Evil. He posts quite a lot of pictures about what the Thing of Evil's doing. So yeah, I actually think it's him when he posts. I think I'm sure that other people post things on, you know, about getting tickets to see him and book signings and all that kind of thing. I'm sure other people have admin related responsibilities, but he does actually post on there, which is quite good, considering I'm sure he's got better things to be doing. But you've got to
You know,
make
what's
good for your
interesting to
title.
me is he actually has crossed genres so often. I mean, obviously he's within the spectrum of speculative fiction. I mean, he's gone from horror to fantasy, right? I mean, he's gone Western with The
Yeah,
Gunslinger. He's written
I still
so
think it doesn't really matter what he writes though, because if you look at the nominees alone for the books that he's produced, there's a ridiculous amount of books on there, all different genres, some thrillers, some horror, some whatever else you want to call
mystery
it.
too. The guy has written
Yeah.
mysteries.
He won for Jumaki, he won for Doctor Sleep, he won for It, he won for The Green Mile, he won for let's have a look. Misery, but he tied his win with somebody else for that. Not that it makes much of a difference, but it was a
Oh
tie.
God, Misery was so good, and there was nothing in there besides it was just a thriller.
Exactly. Misery is one of the ones that I read as well. I think that was what I read after On Writing. I kind of thought, oh, well,
Oh
it's about
man,
a writer, so I'll read
that
that one
whole
first.
ankle thing, it was so horrible.
It was horrible, but it was I think it's one of the best ones as well.
Uh-huh.
Just for the suspense, just the fact that I was literally like holding my breath as I was reading some scenes, and I very rarely react that way to books. So good on him for that.
The
But
way you
yeah,
can
when you look down
smell
the
the
list, there's just
wound.
ridiculous amounts.
Ooh. When she cauterized it after taking his ankle and foot, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah,
Actually
but
made me
like
hungry for ham. You know what I mean? It's like, how do you do that? That's really horrible.
some of them have got multi awards as well. So it goes through all the different kinds of awards. So like library awards, Library of Congress awards, Locus awards, all that kind of thing. And each book's listed there once or twice. And some of them have won, some of them were nominees. But like this fantasy, it actually says here fantasy novel Cujo.
Cujo's a fantasy novel. It's
According to
more
this,
horror.
it was under the award category was fantasy novel. According to
Interesting.
this,
It's about a
and it was
scary
Cujo.
dog.
Yeah, again with the Mist fantasy novel, I would have said that was kind of
What mist? The
sci-fi.
mist?
The Mist, a fantasy novel, according to this. The Dead
Interesting.
Zone, fantasy novel. But yet for
Interesting.
the stand, it just says novel. So this must be the category that the awards are under, not necessarily the actual.
The Stand probably would be more considered science fiction, dystopian science fiction.
I'd say dystopian, post-apocalyptic dystopian. I
Yeah,
would say,
right?
but The Shining's down as a fantasy novel category as well. Who puts The Shining in a fantasy
It's a ghost
category?
story, right?
Well,
It's a
yeah,
ghost,
or
it's
a
horror.
horror. I would say it's horror, but I don't know. Could be wrong. But still, when you look down this list, all his books are on there: Christine, Pet Cemetery, Talisman, Skeleton Crew, It, The Dark Tower, Tommyknockers, Dark Half, The Stand. All sorts are on there. And yeah, The Stand here in 1991 is under dark fantasy or horror. But then further up, it's under fantasy. So I think it really just depends which category the award is for. So I don't know. But he's won Mystery Writers of America for the Edgar Allan Poe Award, Best Novel and Best Short Story for Mr. Mercedes and Orbits, or Orbits, however you pronounce that. So he is, like you said, he is a fan of other authors as well.
He is a fan of being entertained. He has always been.
Well, he likes
And
really cheesy jokes, doesn't he? One of the jokes that he told at one of the interviews I watched was he did it where he told the beginning bit of the joke and then said, but because I like to write suspense, I'm going to wait until the end of this talk to tell you the end, to tell you the punchline. And it was two jumper cables walking to a bar. And then you had to listen to an hour and a half of him talk about other things and be interviewed and have questions put to him and whatnot. And then at the end, he told the punchline, and it was just the cheesiest joke in the world. But because he'd kind of stretched it out in his typical Stephen King personality way that he did it, it went down really well. So that's something that I really like about him as well. I like his sense of humor when you watch him. He's got a really good sense of humor.
I've always liked him. I've always liked him. And to get back to Tabitha King, I mean, I just looked at what she's published, and it's only been a handful of stuff. right? I
Yeah,
mean,
there is only a couple, but does she not teach and things as well? She's probably got other things going on in her life as well as writing. And I can
her,
imagine if she's in with her husband, she probably edits and things for him as well, so she'll have stuff to do.
I think it's a partnership. I mean, it doesn't say that
Yeah.
necessarily, but it looks like without Stephen King, without Tabitha King, there is no Stephen King. You know what I
It's
mean?
interesting.
And
I found a full list of the entire sort of everything he's ever produced on his website. He's got a full list of everything. He's got, I forgot Under the Dome as well. That's a book that I own that I haven't read, but
yeah,
I've
and that
watched the
series, I mean,
series.
the funny thing about him is you cannot really do a very good job translating his work. It does not translate very well. Certain things do, like what the Green Mile translated very well to movies. What was that one? The Shawshank Redemption translated very well to film, that short story. But
Have you heard about the silly little story that he told about the Shawshank Redemption when he went to Target? I think it was Target. His wife sent him out. Have you heard of this?
no, please, I'll tell me.
It's quite funny actually. He said that he once when they lived in they went to Florida or they lived in Florida or have recently moved to Florida since they've got older. And he said his wife kind of sometimes sends him out for things that aren't really that important, things that she thinks he's capable of getting on his own as a bloke going shopping. And she said he went down this aisle to try and find whatever it was that she'd sent him for, and this older woman was there, and she looked at him and said, "I know who you are. You're Stephen King. You write all them scary books." And he was like, "Well, yeah, I am Stephen King." And she said, "I don't like them scary books. I like those really uplifting books like The Shawshank Redemption." And Stephen King said, "Well, I actually wrote that." And she went, "No, you didn't." And like started arguing with him over which books he did and didn't write. So I thought that was hilarious because I can just imagine Stephen King stood in the middle of a supermarket like, who the hell is this woman? I wrote a book and she don't even believe me that I wrote it. What he needed to do was go to a shelf and pick it up and say, "Oh, here it is. Here's the evidence. This is my picture on the back." But I could just imagine him in the middle of a store, like looking at this woman as if to say, "Is this for real?"
That's crazy.
I know.
That's that was in Florida, you said?
Yeah, Florida. I think it was a
Yeah. Well,
Target.
that
He
makes
said
sense.
Target or Walmart or something.
That
Walmart, I
makes
think
sense.
it
Have
is.
you ever been to Florida? That's
Yes, I've
basically
been a
what
couple of
lives in
times.
Florida is just crazy people.
I've been a couple of times. I've been in the big Walmarts. Walmarts there. I've never been in a Target, but I've been in Walmart plenty of times and loved it because they're amazing compared to the supermarkets we have here. They're tiny in comparison to yours in America. So that alone was fascinating. But just to imagine Stephen King there doing his daily shopping and some random woman accuses him of not writing a book that's so famous.
He lives in Sarasota, which is like right down the street. It's not a poor place. I mean, it's a very, very nice town right down the street from Tampa where I went to college. So it being in my college was not a stretch, but he wasn't there, I don't think, the day that dude got all excited. But you know what's really interesting? His number of stories is not very big. I mean, it's big compared to what I've written novel-wise. It's about, what, 50 or so. But if you go to his IMDb page, the dude has 238 writing credits from,
Well, I can attempt to count these up for you, but
I would say 50, but yeah, I mean, go ahead and
novels
count all.
alone. Shall I have a count? One, two,
Go,
three, four,
please.
five, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and I'm only sort of not even halfway through. 4, 5, 6, 30, 40, 50. There's exactly 60 books listed under novels alone on his website. That's not
Novels
including,
alone. So that's
yeah,
a
that's not
nice
including
career.
short stories, novellas, non-fiction, collections, novels written under his Bachman surname, then they're not included. So that
Oh,
just
really?
alone, yeah, just alone under Stephen King, that's a ridiculous amount of books, isn't it? So he's done pretty well, but he's been around a while as well. So he's even got
I
poems and essays listed.
wonder what kind of poems Stephen King wrote.
And I never realised. Well, I can give you the names of them. I wonder if I click one, will it take me to one? Let's have a look.
Right? I would love to read a Stephen King poem.
Oh, it looks like they're in his novels. Like I've just clicked on one that says Paranoid, a chant. And when I've clicked on it, it actually takes me to the Skeleton Crew book. So I'm wondering if it's included in like the book somewhere, something that
Uh,
he's written, as part of the story. Silence. His poem Silence was produced in The Devil's Wine with Ray Bradbury and Peter. Is it? Do you know pronounce it Straub or Straub? I can never pronounce his surname, but he
Strobe?
was in there as well.
You're asking the
As
wrong
well.
person. I don't talk to anybody. It's just me reading. So
There's one
I
as well in The Bazaar of Bad Dreams, which is a recent one, I think. There's a poem called Tommy in that one. So it must just be that he writes poetry and sticks it in his books sometimes, like
yeah.
chants that kids say and things like that. There's a few in the Bazaar of Bad Dreams by the look of it, because I've just clicked on another one.
I honestly think when he passes in however number of years that is into the future, he will be deemed one of the most prolific authors of the 21st century,
I
the
think he
20th
already is.
century.
He
Do
already
you
is
think so?
easily.
Do you
Yeah.
remember 20 years ago, 15, 10 years ago, he was made fun of? I mean, people ridiculed him. They said that he was ridiculous. Reading a Stephen King book was lauded as one of the most ridiculous things you could do in literature. And now you look at him, you look at his IMDb, 238 writing credits. I mean, basically, how could you even go in your life without having been affected by him? You have seen something he's written. You've picked up one of his books. You've watched a television series that he has had a hand in.
Even if you're not really a Stephen King fiction fan, his on writing book alone has helped me. If I hadn't have picked up
That
his on writing book, I might not have actually got into his work to begin with.
that is a great point. Not just you, me, countless others, millions of other writers have picked up
Yeah.
his book and said the exact same thing. Stephen King has made me the writer that I am today. And that
He's
has probably
certainly
spawned.
contributed. Whether he's actually made somebody the writer they are is debatable. But to not say that you didn't read his information and take it on board, because every single how-to book or biography or anything like that I read, I always take something from it. Like just the other day, I was telling you about Tony Robbins' books. I've just literally just purchased two today because I've been watching him and listening to his podcast so much and felt so influenced by him that I felt I needed to buy his books. So having read a Stephen King book on writing and learned a lot from that and kind of got a feel for his personality, all these writers, just like me, then decide, actually, maybe there is something to this guy's work. And then they go out and buy a load of his paperback books and become a fan that way, which is exactly how I did it. So it's interesting the influence that people have when they write something non-fiction or tutorial wise, and then get you hooked some other way through that. It's interesting that the fiction part didn't come first for me. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know about you, but I kind of feel just his life alone, the fact that he's overcome drugs, the fact that he's overcome problems with his wife, he's had somebody go into his house and threaten to blow it up, he's had a van hit him and nearly kill him and all this kind of thing, and yet he is still as successful as he is today, because any one of those things could have halted his career, and yet he's just powered through and continued to write and continued to be as popular and as prolific as he is. So you've got to
I
take your
mean,
hat off to him,
I go
really.
through the list of this work though, and I can basically say I read Carrie, I read Salem's Lot, I watched The Shining, I read Rage, I read The Stand, I watched Dead Zone, I watched Firestarter, I saw Cujo. Come on, Running Man, I read it and saw the movie countless times. Go to Arnold Schwarzenegger,
Oh,
The
Running
Dark
Man, I forget
Tower,
that one.
right?
So many of them, though, you think, oh, you don't realize it's Stephen King really until
Yeah, exactly.
you kind of say no, it's the story where, and then you explain it, and then you go, oh yeah, I didn't even realize. Like the
The
Running Man,
Dark
I
Tower
completely
is
forgot
coming
that.
out this Christmas. I think it's this Christmas.
I really
Or
want to read the Dark Tower, but I've
oh,
just not
it's
got around
really
to it.
good. Christine read it, and the movie's so horrible. Pet Cemetery read it, saw the movie.
That
Psycho
movie,
the
I did not
Werewolf
like that
read it.
movie.
The Talisman read it. Peter Straub. Was that him? No, it was somebody else. Thinner. God, that book. That was a novella, I think. I'm not
I haven't read
sure.
that one. Is it really creepy?
It's really good. It's about a guy who gets cursed by a gypsy. And that's actually what got him ratted out as Richard Bachman. That's the one where the guy working at the bookstore said, no, this is not a dude named Richard Bachman. This is Stephen King writing as Richard Bachman.
Ah, yes.
There was a
Well,
miniseries about it when I was a kid. I watched it so many times. The guy who played the judge in Night Court played one of the characters in it. was so good. Eye of the Dragon was a great fantasy story. Was a great fantasy story. The Dark Tower, obviously. Misery, we both talked about it. I mean, the Kathy Bates movie was brilliant. I never read the Tommy Knockers. That's one of the books that kind of fell away from me. I never got back to it. Dark Half, didn't read or see the movie.
I'll tell you something now that this has really plagued me since I watched the video. It was an interview that he did, and it was kind of I say interview, it was like a speech or a talk that he gave and then took questions afterwards. But I've posed this to every possible person I can think of with any writing related experience. My dad, he's quite creative, idea wise, he's had it as well. So I'll put it to you and see what you say. Stephen King sort of invited anybody to finish a story that he was writing. I forget what year, and he called it The Ladies' Room. And basically, he had this idea one day that I think he was traveling, and he had this idea that there'd be a husband and wife and a little boy in the airport. And the wife would say, "Excuse me, love, I've just got to nip to the toilet." And she'd disappear into the ladies' room and be in there for God knows how long. And then other men would come and sort of stand waiting for the wife to go in. You know, like sometimes you see them all stood outside waiting for the wives and sort of tapping the feet and checking the watches. And he said, I could picture all this. And he said, the women would go in and nobody would come out. So after a while, the security guy would go in, or the security woman would go in, and she'd never come out. And then there'd be a scream, and the door would close, and then the army would get involved, and the police would get involved. And he said, but I could never figure out what the hell was going on in the room. So he never finished the story. So he sort of said, if you can finish it, send him it, and if he likes it, he'll do like a co-author thing with you to finish it off. But I could never figure out what the hell was going on in there either. But I've asked so many people, and everybody comes up with a different ending. I'm sure between us, we could probably get him some kind of ending for the ladies' room.
Oh, between us?
Well, between everybody, I've had that many different ideas. I've had ideas where the women are being rescued from horrible relationships. I've had it where there's aliens that have taken over the bathroom. I've had it where it's where you walk in and there's another dimension opened up by mistake. Or I've had all sorts of suggestions put to me, but none of them have really clicked enough for me to want to sit and write it. But seeing as though you're an author, I thought maybe I'd see if you could spark an idea or two. If not, it's going to bug you like hell now because it's been bugging me.
Well, I mean, I don't know. So
But
many
it's
different
interesting, isn't it, that even authors like that have false starts as well, because he must have
Yeah.
really sat and thought about that for ages and then gone, do you know what? I don't know. I really don't know. I'm going to have to just stop writing and move on.
It's interesting though, as a writer though, what do you do with a false start? I had 3 of them this month. I started 3 stories that I probably could go back and finish, but why? You know what I mean? I have so
He
many of them.
I think he probably does, but we just don't know about it because he's not as open as some indies are. You know, indies are all about talking to each other, aren't they? And he's already a successful author, so he has no need to talk about that kind of thing.
Well,
But
the
I bet he
thing about
does.
false starts though is you eventually can go back and finish them. And the popular thing with Stephen King is he'll figure it out. Like he'll be thinking about it, and once you figure out where you went wrong, you just fix it. And the ladies' room probably never really came back to him. It was probably a dumb idea to begin with in terms of like, okay, the ladies' room, all those ladies disappeared. Like you said, you came up with all those ideas, and like he probably came up with the same ideas and said, you know what? Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe maybe it was all those ideas. What do I do? I do go into my idea when you were saying is, oh, it's another dimension. They go
Yeah,
through and
exactly.
there's a interdimensional war happening, or it goes into space and they float away and they all die instantaneously. And then what do you do when they do die? Well, all those husbands are now, widowers. What do you do? They're widowers. Now they watch them mourn. What do you
But he
do when they
never
come
he never
back?
kind of said whether or not he ever sent a male character in, because all the while it's all female characters that are going in because it's a female public toilet. So all these women are going in, but what would happen if he sent a male in? Would they just
Maybe it's
open
just
the
a
door
regular bathroom.
and everything be normal, or would it happen to them as well? But they just don't know that because nobody's dared go in.
Yeah.
You know, there's all these kind of. I bet he really sat and had to go through all this, and then finally realised that maybe it was too like some of his other books, or maybe the idea had been done before. And he's obviously then come to the conclusion that he needs to just grin and bear that it just wasn't working out. So, but it's bugged me ever since I heard that, because I was kind of thinking, Stephen King of all people, I would have thought he could have come up with a really creepy ending for that. but that's made me want to come up with a really creepy ending. But I know that whatever I was to put forward would have already been suggested anyway, so there's no
Yeah.
point.
Do you have dead ends? Right? I remember dead stories. You have stuff that you've started that you probably
Yeah,
plague you too
loads.
all the time. I mean, it's awesome when
I
you
have
do.
books ongoing that are currently plaguing me where when I've sat down and started writing the book, it's been so clear and so crisp in my mind. And then I've got there and thought, actually, I don't know what the hell I was thinking because this is crap. And then I've thought, well, I'm still passionate about the book and I still want to finish the book. So what other way can I go? And I think he must do the same as well. Maybe he is passionate about finishing a book, and it could be any book, say even Cujo, which I actually know how he got the idea for Cujo, which I'll tell you in a minute if you don't already know. But maybe he sat down one day and thought, I'll write this book, this really awesome book called Cujo, got halfway through it and then realised that the ideas that he originally had weren't as good as he thought, and he's had to go back and brainstorm some more. Do you know how he got the idea for Cujo?
No, tell me.
He he's said this several times, so I know that the story is kind of true because I've seen him, witnessed him tell the same story several times. He had a motorbike of some kind or a moped that he was riding, and it was just about to die. And somebody said, "Oh, if you go down the road at this particular address, there's a guy who will fix it for you, and he's a really good mechanic, and whatever he tells you it's going to cost, it'll cost." So Stephen King thought, well, sounds like a good deal. I'll go and get my bike fixed. And just as he was pulling into the guy's driveway, the bike died completely. And he said he was kind of walking up the driveway to meet the guy, and this massive dog came out. Is it a Saint Bernard? Is that the name of the dog? The kind of dog that Cujo is? I
Like
can't remember.
I thought it was
The,
a.
the really the
Let me
really
look.
big dog. One of those came out and kind of growled at him. And the guy came out and said to the dog, leave him be. And he says, "Oh, I won't hurt you. He's actually quite nice. Just keep coming." And he set off walking, and the dog went for him. And he said the guy actually threw a spanner at the dog to shut the dog up. And instead of apologising to Stephen King for the way the dog had behaved, his excuse was, "Well, Buster must not have liked your face." And he said, "That's how I got the idea for Cujo, is because of this really terrifying dog, and the influence that it had over him and presumably other people." So that was the
Oh yeah,
story
what is
behind
a Saint
Cujo.
Bernard?
Yeah, I
Interesting.
think it was the Saint Bernard. But yeah, that was the story behind Cujo. So it's interesting that he remembers most of how he wrote his stories. The really big ones, the ones that clearly mean something to him. He remembers how he got those ideas, whereas I don't think I could say the same for my books. Could you?
Yeah, I remember
Could you?
stories that I did never write that I wish I had started. I remember
But
my
like the
first
books
story
that you
from when I
have
was.
or the stories that you have, would you be able to remember exactly where and when you got that idea?
I think so.
Oh, would you? Oh, good for you.
Yeah,
I don't
they're
think I
like
could.
they're like sexual relationships in a way. I can never forget people that I've loved. I can never forget people I've had fights with. I can never forget people that, I've had intense feelings for. They're like that for me. All hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. I can remember exactly where I came up with the idea. I can remember where I intended to go with it, and even the disappointment of having never actually finished that intention.
I
Even if
think
they only made a page out of it, it's like, oh man, I wish I had finished that. And even if whatever reason it didn't get to that point, it's the disappointment of having never got there.
I like as well that Stephen King remembers most of those, because he said once that he kind of lives for the minute. He doesn't. He said the only thing I'm sort of aiming to do in any moment is not to sort of kick it as I'm talking to somebody on stage. He wants to get through the moment that he's in, and that's kind of all he hopes for. And he said that once he was in a hotel in London. It might have been the discussion we had about his time in England. I don't know. And he went to one of the hotels in London and asked the guy. He had an idea. I forget which book it was. One of the big ones, one of the really well-known ones. And he said he spoke to the guy at reception and said, I need to do some writing. Can you point me to a desk or a place or
Okay.
somewhere? And the guy actually took him up on one of the floors, and it was Rudyard Kipling's desk. It
Yeah.
belonged to Rudyard Kipling, and he'd actually died at the desk, and the guy never told him. So Stephen King was writing at this desk all the while, not realizing that the author who actually owned it had died writing at it. So I just think, like, for stories such as that, because something happened to him at the time he was writing it, he remembers it so clearly and so vividly. But I don't think I could remember how I got the ideas for my books, not even Pandora, and that's taken me well, I started writing it in 2010, and I still don't really think I could tell you exactly the ideas that came to me at the time. So he must have a really good memory.
Huh, that's interesting. So you do not remember the intention with Pandora when you first started putting it to paper?
I
Or
remember the inspiration behind it because
well,
it's a
that's what he's
poem.
talking about. I mean, that's basically Cujo was a living thing from the minute that dog started to bark at him. And
But I think it's slightly different because mine's a poem and it exists and it still exists, whereas his was something that just happened to him. It was a memory, an experience, whereas mine's kind of something that's physically written that it's impossible to forget because it's in front of me all the time. And
his
whereas for
was, his
him,
was too. And it might have ended, but I don't think you understand in terms of what you have and what he has. It's the exact same thing. It's living. Even though he put in the end on it and it published and made millions of dollars for him or whatever it made for him, it's still the same thing. He might not be able to go back and change it because it's a part of American history. He still wishes he could do things with it. He could probably go back and change thousands of things in it right now. Just like
yeah,
with
maybe.
what yours is, I mean, it's a living part of himself.
Yeah, maybe. I suppose so. I just kind of applaud his memory of the way that he tells the stories. Every time he tells a story, it's exactly the same. It's like he's living it every day. It's like he's, and I suppose he is really because he's
Hmm.
probably told these stories thousands of times, being as
Exactly.
famous as he is. But just to remember it in such detail, and I just think I would really love to remember every idea for every story that I got in such crisp detail because I kind of think I wouldn't be able to fail writing my ideas if I remembered it that well. But I suppose we're all different, but you've got to commend him for the work that
Yeah,
he's done.
I do commend him. I think he's a fantastic author. I've definitely loved what he has allowed us to witness. I'm, going through his list of books. I mean, I've have fallen off a little bit over the years. I mean, there's been a few books here that I haven't really read, but
Yeah, there's a couple there that I kind of not particularly like the look of or not as interested in story wise, but like this 11/22/63, that's the book
oh
that I
my
know it's been
God,
turned into like a series, but that's not really something that I'm overly interested in
I
reading.
loved it. It was really good. I
I
didn't like
probably
the
will.
series.
I probably
I
will
didn't like
just
the
for the
series.
sake of because it's a Stephen King book and I want to read it at some point, but it wouldn't be at the top of my list.
Duma Key, I did not finish, but it would started out really well. I mean, the idea that this guy could just go ahead and hit a canvas and paint whatever he wanted was just a stroke of genius. I mean, not no pun intended. Under the Dome was a really interesting idea. I never finished it though, unfortunately. But
It's a very big
11/22/63
book.
sucked me through in like a few days. I mean, it's like a 1,000-page novel, and I was like done before I knew it. Um, and that's
There
pretty
must be
much
people out there that have read every single book and continue to read everything possibly, because there's going to be super fans out there that have read absolutely everything.
they get excited, right? As soon as they
Yeah.
publish one.
And he publishes a lot, so they're spending an awful lot of money on Stephen King books in a year to keep up with
60
everything.
novels. I mean,
Yeah.
he does not. He had a falling out. He had that huge accident, and he stopped publishing for a while. I mean, you could look through his novels, and
Well,
you
how
can
old is he?
actually.
Is he approaching 70? Is he in his late 60s?
Let me
If he's
go
got 60
back.
novels and say he's, I don't know, as an example, he's 60 years old, that's a book a year, plus his short stories, plus his other books that run
69.
for the name. So he's 69. Oh, so he is nearly 70. But that's
He's gonna be
still,
70 September 21st, so he's about 70 years old.
oh, a couple of days before my birthday. But yeah, I think he effectively that's a book a year more than a book of a year because he's producing short stories, he's producing screenplays, he's producing books under a different name, poems, all sorts. So is it, effectively that's at least two things a year he's produced since his career, if not more. And I just think that's amazing.
Very prolific.
Extremely prolific.
238 titles under his name as a content creator on IMDb. That's unbelievable. 238 credits. I mean, in terms of writing on his Wikipedia page, we've got 60. That's impressive. But if you go to IMDb, 238. He's worth
Oh,
$400
probably
million
more.
dollars.
I'm sure there's
I,
stuff that is written that is very that isn't very well known that people sometimes don't include. I'm sure there's more than that if we really were to dig, if we had the time.
I think that's what IMDb is. It's just digging and mentioning everything that he's been given credit for as a writer. That's
Ah, okay.
just as a writer. Um, but that he's an impressive guy in arts and letters. I mean, he has been, he's not invisible, obviously. Everybody knows his name. He's not going to die like Lovecraft and then eventually be dug out of his grave and been given credit. He's
What's even
definitely getting.
more interesting is I've just scrolled down at the bottom of his website and he has some kind of radio station or a podcast. Stephen King, rock and roll radio, streaming live to the undead. Listen now. I'm tempted to click on it, but it'd probably put the feed through our interview.
Yeah, that might put me into copyright territory. I had a guest just recently request a piece of music, and I said, sure, it'll probably be copyrighted. She goes, but they won't mind. And I put it on her podcast as the intro music, and they did copyright me. Like they have like some kind of ninja thing on YouTube.
Yeah, they do. They strip. You get like 3 strikes and you're out. Thankfully, I don't have any strikes yet because I always use royalty-free music. But yeah, they don't like that.
It wasn't a strike though. It was I just can't put any ads on that particular video.
Ah, okay.
Not that it really matters, but it's still I couldn't. Anyway, this was a good one. Huh?
Stephen King. Overall, for Stephen King, would you say that you are a fan? That most of the things that you've read of Stephen King's you appreciated? Would you say that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I am a fan, and I would say that he inspired me to write. I would say that I couldn't be the writer I am today if he wasn't the writer that he is. And I would also
Oh, that's a
say
bold
he could,
statement.
yeah, I think so. And I would say that he's not the writer that he is without the writers that inspired him. So in a way, it's kind of very ancestral. Lovecraft and Howard and Stephen King, and then there's, a host of other people that have made me. So I mean, it's very interesting the way this whole thing works. How about you?
You are to Stephen King the way I am to Mitch Albom, because his work has influenced me greatly, has inspired me greatly. And yes, Stephen King's on writing has taught me a lot, but I wouldn't say that his work has really influenced me as a writer because, well, I've only really been reading his books the past sort of year or two. I've not really been a Stephen King fan growing up. I've been aware of his stuff. I've seen movies and things like that, and TV shows, but I've not really actually sat and thought I'll binge read Stephen King. So I think you are to Stephen King what I am with Mitch Albom. But yeah, I agree. He's extremely influential. I'll give him that.
And I have a feeling that we're not going to be saying goodbye to Stephen King for a while. He looks like he's in incredibly good shape. He's only 70
He's
years
really
old.
healthy.
We could have 30 more years of him. So I mean,
I hope we do.
he's
I
quit.
really hope we do.
He quit smoking 30 years ago. He doesn't do drugs. I mean, I would imagine he doesn't drink. So maybe,
I don't
cross
think
your
he drinks,
fingers.
actually. I really don't think he drinks. I'm sure in one of his interviews he did say that he doesn't drink alcohol. Which is something else as well. I wonder if that's tied into his drugs related thing. When he quit drugs, he quit drinking.
Yeah,
Maybe.
it's hard. That stuff kind of makes your mind work in different ways. I mean, you start looking at substance abuse and decide that none of it's worth it.
Maybe you just thought, maybe I just exactly like it's the whole thing's just not worth it. He's had a near miss with his accident and all that kind of thing, and maybe in the end he just decided that his health and his life was more important and his family were more important.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing, the accident that we didn't really cover. That kind of changed his life around a little bit too.
Well, didn't he go for a walk and the van kind of
Came out of nowhere and hit him.
didn't he buy the van? He actually bought the van, didn't he?
Yeah, he bought the van and destroyed it,
Good on him.
beat the crap out of it or something like that. And that guy killed himself after the fact too, didn't he?
Did he? I don't know. I never heard that, but wow. Although I'm not sure I'd want to be known as the guy that killed Stephen King, but still, I don't know. How have you found that out? Have you researched it, or is it just?
I'm researching it right now.
I suppose taking any life, you'd feel that way, wouldn't you? If you hurt anybody that much, you'd fight him with the guilt. But still, that's a bit
I'm
sinister.
gonna look up. You know what's funny? Oh, here it is. Okay, let's see. During his time, physical therapy. He was walking on the shoulder of Main State Route 5, Brian Edwin Smith, distracted by an unrestrained dog moving in the back of his minivan.
Oh, goodness.
He struck King. He landed in a depression about 14 feet from the pavement. He was hit by behind. So the driver was not speeding, reckless, or drinking.
Do you, just while you're looking at that, do you have any Stephen King books to hand? Because I've just had a look on the FAQ bit of his website and found something really interesting. And it says, what do the dates mean at the back of your book? And the answer is, when a date appears at the end of a book after the story has been finished, it refers to the date that Stephen King finished writing it. If there's two dates, it refers to when he started and when he finished it. So it'd be interesting to see how long it actually took him to write each book, if those dates are there. Do you have a book there?
Well, yeah, I have Wizards and Glass,
Any other
Dark
dates?
Tower #4. The last page doesn't have a date. It's
Oh.
paperback though. I don't know if that.
Oh, maybe it's in some of his older ones then. Maybe somebody's found out that there's dates in the back of the book for whatever reason. I wonder if he's been dating his books. I just thought that were really interesting, something maybe to look out for when you're next reading a Stephen King book.
I am done with books, paper books anyway. I just do electronics now. I have not bought a regular book in a very long time. He was in considerable pain. He was conscious when the cops got there. He says he was going to stop writing. Brian Smith, and he is dead. He was found dead in his home. He was 43 days old. 43 days old. He was 43 years old. Health and welfare check. Huh, that's interesting. I think he killed himself.
It's tragic.
Oh, he accidentally killed himself on fentanyl, which I think is extremely easy to do. Yeah, the fentanyl's easy to die from.
And the podcast just took an extremely sinister turn, everybody.
Which we're talking about Stephen King, so.
Do you think that Stephen King will end up starring in the Dark Tower movie? Do you think he'll make an appearance?
I don't know. Has he said he's going to?
I don't know, because some of his other movies and series, he does sort of make a bit of a. He plays small parts, doesn't he? And he appears here and there, and I'm just curious to know whether he's still doing that. Like in It, will he turn up in It somewhere, or?
Well, I'm looking at his IMDb, and it does not say he's acting in it. Last one, he was a diner patron in Under the Dome. Heads Will Roll, the episode.
Yes, he was in Under the Dome. I remember that.
And he was in Sons of Anarchy. He played
He was in
Bachman.
The Stand as well. He was in the Stand series with Gary. What's his face?
He was Teddy Wizek. He was in The Stand in 1994.
Yeah.
He doesn't really act very much.
I think he just probably likes to make an appearance here and there in the adaptations of his books, which is just more fun than anything, isn't it?
Yeah. The Lawnmower Man. He's got some interesting credits. 238 writing credits. That's just mind-boggling. I mean, if we had the time, I would go through here because a lot of these are not his books and stuff.
Yeah, some of them he'll have done like the opening, the preface and stuff for, I guess.
The Man Who Loved Flowers is a short story. Haven, short story. I mean, God, a lot of these are short stories. Can you imagine writing a short story and having it be made into a movie? That's like my dream. Hey, we'd like to make one of your short stories into a movie.
I think I'd pass out a little bit and cry.
And cry.
Yeah.
Are you okay? No. My life has meaning.
I think all authors feel that way all the time about every single thing they produce. If I could ever see this on a movie screen, my life would be complete. Until then, I'm nothing.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I have kids, so I have at least some meaning.
Okay, maybe not nothing then.
I have created something with meaning. So how are we going to sum this conversation up. I can't remember
Just,
what we
just
did with
overall
Charlene.
say that is awesome, and we love Stephen King. And if he's ever listening to this, please come on our podcast.
Please give us hundreds of millions of dollars for talking about you so graciously.
And don't hate us for talking about you like this either.
Don't curse us in the
Very cool.
multiverse.
I think at the core he's a really cool guy, and I hope to see more of what he's written, more of new books and years more work produced by him. And I hope to catch up with the reading list of all the books that I own of his that I've not yet had time to read.
The neat thing for me is that you never know what's going to come out. You know what I
Mm.
mean? It's not going to be
Yeah,
every book is going to blow you away. It's going to be, oh, you know what? That sounds like a neat one. I want to read that.
yeah.
Mr.
I think
Mercedes is a detective story, and I didn't even know that until just recently. I was like, huh, I'm going to download that one and read that.
I think
It's
he's just got so many, and it's in such a wide variety that there is something there for everybody. I think I'm pretty sure even like those that only strictly read romance will be able to find something that agrees with them on some level of Stephen King's, because he's produced that much in that many different genres. It's kind of hard not to find something to read.
back when he was writing under Richard Bachman, his publishers were worried that he was going to flood the market and kind of, dilute himself as a property.
Mm.
And they basically said, don't worry. Eventually they said, whatever, don't worry about it. And I think at the end of the day, he did kind of dilute himself. He did kind of thin himself out a little bit, but I guess it really didn't matter. Eventually you find yourself a Stephen King book and you read it.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what it is. So we're going to get together and we're going to talk about Mitch Albom, right?
Yes.
And
Looking
we're going
forward
to
to
do
that.
his library of works. It's not as extensive, but I think since he specifically does death fantasy, it's going to be more of a specific topic that we'll be able to
Yes,
talk about.
he is my ultimate favorite author in the whole world. I love him. I would give anything to just have a 5-minute conversation with him about what goes on in his head. Um,
Cool.
but
Well, I
yeah, I'm
can't wait to
really,
talk
really
about
looking
that
forward to
subject
that.
matter too. I love him as an author and I love that subject matter. So I'm really looking forward to that. But before that, I do hope to do a Kurt Vonnegut episode. And unfortunately, I'm probably stuck doing that one on my own. A little bit intimidated to do it, but I'm going to miss
You'll be
you,
fine.
Emma. I'm
You'll be
going to miss you.
fine.
Uh,
Absolutely fine. You'll do wonderful, I'm sure. Good practice as well.
so I'm not this next Wednesday, but the Wednesday following, or when are we getting together again to do
I will quickly consult my diary and see if I
your
can find
paper
you.
diary, your archaic
Yes, I'm
form of
old school.
timekeeping?
I am old school. I think we gave it a couple of weeks so I could get my book signing event out of the way, and that's in 2 weeks. So it
I
must
have you
be.
down for August 23rd, so it's like in a month.
That sounds roughly right. August 23rd at 6 p.m. my time, so that'll be 1 p.m. your time to discuss Mitch Albom.
If you've got extra time between now and then, let me know and we'll speed this thing up.
Yeah, definitely.
Otherwise, this was a wonderful discussion. I so much appreciate you joining me today for our very, very cursed episode of Mirage, speculating on speculative fiction, which I will have to edit the living crap out of.
Please do. I think it's just one of those things, isn't it? Stephen King, thank you for cursing us. We don't appreciate it. But yeah, no, thank you for inviting me back on, Brian. It's been brilliant, and I look forward to talking about Mitch Albom with you in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good.
Cool.
All right. Soon.
See you later.
All right. Bye-bye.